The readers of God An Autobiography are fascinating people. Take Jonathan Weidenbaum, for example. John is a brilliant philosopher and an engaging teacher of philosophy. He also travels the world, visiting its holy places both east and west. He wrote a penetrating review of God An Autobiography for the online academic journal, Reading Religion. Meet John now.
Well, I'm very pleased. I always tell people, who are the most fascinating people you know? And it's mainly people who've read God An Autobiography, because for one thing, if they didn't have a lot going for them, they probably would not be reading such a book. They have to have a certain degree of spiritual openness and intellectual curiosity. And you certainly are a primo example of that phenomenon. I can tell from, we've had lunch, I can tell from talking with you, you're a terrific teacher. Your whole idea of teaching, which seems inspired by Socrates, is itself wonderful. And you're deeply knowledgeable about religion, East and West, philosophy and religion, East and West. And so, you bring a lot to the reading of the book. Many of us, including me in writing the book, was quite a neophyte in all of this. I was praying about text I'd read for the first time and only in translation and so forth, and just wrote down what I received. But before we talk about the book, I'd like to know, where does your spiritual story begin? If you kind of go back in your life, what was your spiritual, you might say, situation or early in life?
Wow, this is one of those questions that I know I'll be walking later to the store and I'll say to myself, I left this out, or I left that. Yes. A very big question.
Yeah.
I think I never had a single kind of awakening. I just have a personality that tends to gravitate toward big kinds of questions.
Yes.
But never just at a simply abstract or discursive level.
Yeah.
I make very powerful, perfect sense that philosophies, as they veer toward the spiritual life, would captivate me and capture me and call me more than any other discipline, right? So, and on the other hand, look,
because they're so vivid.
Yes, they're vivid, they're visceral, they're almost where ethics, metaphysics, and art meets.
Yes.
Right? They paint a picture of reality and how we are to live within it. All right, and so I always like to say religion is meaning at its most intense.
Yes, very good definition.
Right, and there's a little Deweyan influence. I mean, there's a quote by John Dewey in Art is Experience when he says, "You can judge a philosophy by how it handles the aesthetic and art."
Yes.
Judge a philosophy by how it can handle something which says so much about the very nature of human experience. And I think if Dewey was in the room, he'd very much approve of this. If he took the word aesthetic and art out and put religion and theology in, he would be fine with that, even though he was offering a purely naturalistic, non-reductionistic, naturalistic picture of reality, he'd be happy with that as well. And I think there's some truth to that. But, it's interesting. While I'm a confluence of many vectors in regards to this. Even when I was in late high school, Asian philosophies, Buddhist schools of thought, various forms of Hindu scripture have always called me, and sort of I found a lot of meaning in them.
So Hebrew scripture, Asian thought, as early elements.
That's right. At the same time, I think to be a spiritual and intellectually reflective person is to realize we're also historical beings and we carry history with us. There is, this is an interesting theme for me. You can go to China where decades of Maoism has repressed religion and you still peel away a layer and you see Confucianism.
Yes.
I have Japanese students who come from very secular background, but peel away a layer and you can see Shinto and Buddhist influence. So although I'm secular, I'm non-practicing, although I'm engaging myself in other religions, there is something in the Judaic tradition which has its grip on me whether I like it or not,
And this, in part, that historical side.
Yeah, whereas
the Hebrew scriptures is a scripture of history, of God and man in time.
been a while since I read Gadamer, but something about historically affected consciousness. This speaks to some of this. That there's sort of in the way we feel out the world, we carry a culture with us in our language and our mode of being. So there is something that in the Judaic tradition which won't fully let me go. And nor do I want it to. And so it provides I think in one of the essays you read of mine, and I'm flattered about it so much, the one where it talks about multi-religious belonging between, I speak about Zen Buddhism and various Eastern philosophies, but also about certain philosophies within Judaism, how there is a kind of, there is somewhere in that a kind of inability for an easy fusion. And I think that adds a vitality to our spiritual lives as it has added it to mine. So that's kind of, so
we now live almost viscerally, in terms of our next door neighbors and what's coming to us in the news or any information source in a multi-religious world.
Yeah.
There was a great tendency of people who noticed, well, there is wisdom in a lot of these different traditions, to want to sort of put them in a blender.
Yeah.
It's one nice, kind of vanilla flavored milkshake out of them. And as I recall your piece, you're sort of pushing against that. No, the variety is itself part of the truth, you might say, the spiritual truth.
And you could, so in a way, to go back to the question you're asking me, it's like, it's not a single awakening, it's more of various steps of development. So there was a period of time where I was sympathetic to a perennialist kind of perspective. Yeah,
that's the blender. That's one kind of blender version.
And then something in me always gravitated towards existential type of philosophies, Kierkegaard, Buber, that kind of set themselves against that.
Yes.
So, well, not be fully separate from it either.
Right.
I mean, Buber was a great interpreter of Hasidism, and there's a lot of mysticism in Buber. At the same time, there's also a healthy rebellion against it.
Yeah.
And then so then it just would be just natural that I would begin to gravitate out of that.
Yes.
Perspective.
One lives one life. And, and you make choices.
Yeah, that's right.
You face choices that are different from the choices faced by someone else, right?
Sure. Like Kierkegaard taught me and Buber taught me that sometimes in opposition to something, sometimes sort of a rebellion against something that tries to include you is itself a kind of spiritual motion.
Yes.
Increase the tensions within certain things rather than to release them.
Yes.
And this continues. Part of the reasons why I take such joy in traveling to certain parts of the world, because you actually are confronted with philosophical traditions that somehow are different than the other ones. Theravada Buddhism in Sri Lanka is not the Sikhism I witnessed when I was in Punjab, which is not the Hinduism I saw when I was in the Himalaya. And they
certainly not the one you saw in the textbooks, right?
Yes.
Where it really kind of boiled down to 6 points or something like that, as if that is it. That's the sum of it, of all of them.
Absolutely. And so there's a lot to,
Well, let me ask you then, Jonathan, against that background.
Yeah.
Why, when you encountered God An Autobiography, did you, I'm interested in this question, you pick up something to read. I can't remember if you're reading it online or the book had already come out, but you read page 1, maybe page 2, and there's always the question in my mind, well, why do you keep reading? What are you resonating to or responding to such that you read on and then on and to finally reading the whole thing, the whole book? What's pulling you in?
In the God book.
In God An Autobiography, yeah.
Well, look, whether or not, and I can say this in regards to the God book, I can also say in regards to the Torah, the Upanishads, the Vedas, the Quran, the Guru Granth Sahib, in the end, I am a sympathetic agnostic. I do not know if this truly is a deity disclosing itself to you, or it's a deep level of your consciousness unfolding like young thread. Who knows? I mean, I don't have a point of view.
Hard to tell the difference.
Finite human point of view.
Yes.
That stated, because a lot unfolded in that book. It was a massive firework display of ideas that just, I mean, in the beginning, God talking about his very origins in a way.
Yes. In a way that I found shocking.
Right. From there, all of a sudden it went to what was almost a course in comparative religions. You know, it's like we see Zoroastrianism and Hinduism and Judaism and the Mahabharata, if I remember correctly, you know,
Yes.
and then an interesting take on Jesus. Then it goes to these broad, almost cosmological issues of many worlds and so basically it was a rich tapestry of origins, history, metaphysical pictures of the nature of things, implications for issues like the problem of evil and free will, and the challenges it gives us.
Mm-hmm.
I also have my whole intellectual life from late undergraduate through my dissertation has been exploring rich polarizing tensions, the existential, self-transcendence and self-actualization, withdrawing inward and engaging with others, historical universal truths and revealed truths within history, infinite and finite. These sort of polar different directions that are very hard to reconcile. And the God book just something with the idea of the God beyond God and a personal God. Ground of the soul and yet our finite individual personality, the integrity that has.
Right.
The book seems to actually be a place where these opposite vectors seem to kind of be placed in a kind of balance, maybe even reconciled in various places. So I find that very compelling in itself.
Well, that's right. And they're there in their particularity, which relates to the very first thing you were talking about. There's never, the blunder never takes place. God says what he's doing with each culture, and you'd think, well, that means we could put them all together. Well, no, they're different. And it's really the vision of a multi-sided divinity showing different sides of himself. In a way, the cultural capacity that varies from one tradition to another facilitates God in showing different aspects of God. And there they all are, with no attempt to reconcile them, you might say logically or philosophically, but there they all are, and to be taken in as real parts of the total picture. Something like that sound?
Yeah.
That's sort of your reading of the book?
Baroque, it's again a rich tapestry. It's not a flattened cosmos, not the block universe that William James is so scared of.
Yes.
But more of what he favorite, more Gothic kind of universe that's richly textured.
Yes.
And I enjoy that.
And of course, you had a background reading it that I did not have writing it. So you could sort of see, you might say, comparisons to the various traditions you've studied popping up here and there. And that was something I learned from when you first, wrote a review of the book. That I thought, since I did not have that background, that's interesting. That says something about how you could relate the book, elements of the book, to various historic traditions, religious, theological positions, and so forth. But let me ask you, that's the impact, how it fit with your kind of natural spiritual intellectual flow as a thinker. Did it affect your life in any way? Do you live differently, or maybe understand your life differently in any way? Or did it just fit into the ongoing flow of your life?
It helped invigorate my polemic against
Against what?
perennial philosophy.
Oh, against the perennialists, we should say, you could describe it better than I, but I'll make my stab first. Those who believe at the highest level, the religions all say the same thing. The highest level tends to be something like the mystical level.
A non-personal ultimate ground.
And it's non-personal. It's the non-personal ground. At the lower level,
Yeah.
People worship the various symbolic representations of that ultimate, and those are the gods are various symbolic representations.
Right.
And it's an enormously appealing way to think about it all, because it kind of gets everything in.
Yeah.
And it makes us feel better if at some fundamental way and high way,
Yeah.
a very high level way, the religions are all saying the same thing. We all think, breathe out when we hear that. We don't have to fight or even argue with each other.
Right.
But perennialist. But this is not a perennialist book, clearly.
No, and it sort of put gas in my tank.
Yes.
In my tank, in my against this.
Yes.
This, with the potpourri of ideas and the emphases on the personal and the individual and the ethical, in balance with the other side, the mystical, the cosmistic, the whatever, all together. Well, it's actually nothing like cosmistic about it, but sort of the personal and the and transpersonal at the same time. Placing them in a balance. It's just vibrant, and it added color and vigor to my own battle as well.
Mm-hmm.
Also, in the end, I am agnostic about a personal divine.
Yes.
And just a little more, just for me to say, maybe, just maybe there is. Maybe there is. Maybe I do not have to fear death. I may be seeing, to draw upon a figure from a fellow Abrahamic religion, I may be now seeing through a glass darkly, right?
Yes, yes.
The other side of that dark glass is, in fact, a personality behind the cosmos, gestating it, tending to it, caring for it.
That actually cares about you personally.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, in a way, a shocking thought.
Right.
The vast mind or whatever of the cosmos could care about Jonathan, could care about Jerry, could care about our next door neighbor, each of us with personal attention, you might say, and loving care.
Sure.
It's a rather radical thought.
Yeah.
One of the things in it, I mean, there's the changing God, but the changing God is in part changing.
Yeah.
Precisely because, and not because God just is roiling around or in flux, but God in part changed, and this is also the personal side. Perhaps there's an impersonal way to putting the point, but God is working with us in time.
Yeah.
That one of the themes in God An Autobiography is that there's work to do in the world.
Yes.
And God is trying to achieve something in the world, and He needs our help to achieve it.
Yeah, that's for Jewish theology in particular. This idea of human co-creator with God is a very simple part of the tradition.
Yes.
Not a God to whom we have to submit completely, but a kind of evolving God with whom we are so evolve in tandem with. That also, of course, fits with classical American philosophy, and so there's a number of traditions that speaks to, and I like that. I find it meaningful to reconcile the ethical with the mystical.
Yes.
One nullifying the other.
Well, what advice do you give? You're a teacher.
Yeah.
About these kinds of questions.
Yeah.
What advice do you give to your students, or would you give to them now, as they pursue their spiritual journey?
Oh, it's a very good question. I think I tend to emphasize in my courses the cracking open, not the healing. Whether international students or local students, they come in, whatever particular ethnic, religious heritage they come from, and I'm posing questions to them that they're receiving for the first time in their lives.
Yes.
Some of them, they couldn't have even imagined the question like, what is the self? What do you mean? I'm me. What do you mean? What is the me? What do you mean or how do you reconcile an all-powerful God with evil in the world, or
Yeah.
it's like the fact that someone sitting next to you in the class is a Buddhist has a completely different metaphysical foundation of the religion. So they're kind of what knowing my students, and kind of I've become best at that.
Yeah.
I'm best at being provocative and cracking open and challenging, and thinking that the healing process is a natural process anyway. That will come later,
Right.
when they try to finally reconcile their need for a God and yet the evil they see in the world, or the fact they come from this particular revealed tradition, and yet how do you know that tradition is right, not the person sitting next to you?
Right.
So I think sometimes the trauma has to come first, and then somehow the assimilation of that comes later. I tell the students, at some point in the course, they don't see it at first, but it comes around that I've given them no answers for these questions.
Yeah.
Finally, is there a God, and can we know there's a God? And what properties does God have? Which religion is the correct if we can know it all? How do you solve the problem of evil? Do we have a self? What ultimately is right and wrong? Am I neurons and cells all the way down, or do we have something in us that's metaphysical? It's not simply our body. I push these questions even for myself. I've never come to the answers I've never come to any answers for the problem, and I don't know if I ever will, but living with the questions is much richer than falling on an easy base, protecting ourselves into a bubble without facing it. And so that's very, very important to me. I don't have answers for a lot of the questions I push to the students. To myself, I don't have them, but I keep searching.
Yes.
But I keep going, and my mind is not. So my advice to students is, don't run away from these questions. Keep pushing them. Keep following them to their conclusion. And then when you find an interest in a specific kind of question, then begin reading about it.
Yes.
And finally, you may come to some, hopefully not final, but tentative, more comfortable, more inclusive picture about what to. Yeah.
And I would add, you'll hopefully come to a more integrated version of yourself than if you had simply avoided the questions and decided, I'm just going to immerse myself in one set of doctrines or practices.
That's right.
And then what you're doing there is you're suppressing.
That's right.
These other aspects of things that do come to our attention in our lives, and things we read, and cultural influences, what we see on TV. We see there are a lot of ideas, and a lot of them have resonance with some part of ourselves.
Part of what I like about the God book is exactly how troubling it is.
Yeah.
When I mention a Jodorowsky film, I mention it for a reason. He's a surrealistic filmmaker. We watch his movies, you're sitting there, you're going, have I just taken acid? What's going on? You see sexual things and colorful things and psychedelic things and spiritual things, and one, like, what's going on? So the book talks about multiple worlds, endless worlds and sort of reincarnation, and it's not a clean picture of the nature of things. There is something mind-blowing in the classic sense of what that word means. So there's something, I like the unsettling character of it. Both its beginning, this through a tour through the world religions from an interesting kind of angle. Some of it very peculiar, very strange. Take the meaning of the incarnation, in Jesus. A refutation of a central Buddhist concept of the void. It's uncompromising, and then finally this psychedelia, it opens up to whole new vistas. So there is something like a bad trip in a way. I kind of like. So the God book will rolls in my mind. Whether or not it's the actual disclosure of a deity to you, Jerry, or some deep level of your, like the Red Book, some deep level of your psyche flowering into your conscious mind. Who knows? I don't have the answer.
And how that would be different from a God's voice.
Right.
That is how God speaks to us.
Yeah. Maybe that's it. That's what it is in the end. Maybe I think that's a Jungian kind of picture.
And maybe we can conclude here, because state it simply, God An Autobiography is a book for religious seekers.
Yeah.
Not people who already feel they found it and close the book and don't want to think about it anymore, but
Exactly.
people who might have found a lot, but yet are still questioning, still looking, and still open, still spiritually open.
Who are open to having yet more to try to assimilate.
Yes.
You know, that's kind of what it is. It's like for those who don't mind expanding mind, it just takes it further, you know.
Right.
And and I love all the details of it. I like that, it's kind of an interesting take on the Mahabharata, and the nature of Jesus, and there was it's a rich book, Jerry. Rich book.
I'll let you go now.
I know you're only.
And anything else I should know about you and your life?
Let me think. I'm returning to India August 2018.
Wow.
And I'm going to go back to the Himalaya region, among other things. Do some more volunteer work there and see some people I already made there, some contacts and some new friends I've made there.
Wonderful.
See some temples I couldn't see when I was there in the winter,
Right.
And then I also see a new area of India too, probably during that month. But between now and then, I'm teaching my classes, I'm writing, I'm just going to be showing my photos on campus.
That's very exciting.
That's
Well,
exciting.
okay, I'll let you go for now. And thank you very much. It's a wonderful interview.
Thank you.
And it's a wonderful series, I think.
Yeah, I always enjoy talking with you, Jerry.
Well,
I always walk away a little, how should I put this, broader,
good.